All right. So, I was just trying to think of like a good primary source to work with this project, and I thought of all kinds of different topics and cultures and ideas. But I kept coming back to the Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. I apologize if you've already heard this, but just going to give a brief rundown and then talk to you about how I had an idea for a game and then how I had an idea for a lesson plan. And then maybe we can collaborate a little bit. So, Buffalo Bird Woman is Hadassah, and she was born in 1839. In the early 1900s, somebody from the University of Minnesota interviewed her about her gardening. For those that don't know, the Mandan Hidatsa have amazing gardening traditions, and they helped with an idea of the Three Sister Garden and would grow corn, beans, and squash along the Missouri River in between or to the west in between Minot and Bismarck. And they lived that way for a very long time. They actually didn't get as involved in some of the wars because they were such good gardeners. They didn't go out much, and so people didn't know about them. She tells just a really cool story about how Mandan Hidatsa came together. And according to legend, one shot corn over the Missouri River, and it landed. I think it was a Mandan shot the corn to a Hidatsa and said corn in Mandan, and the Hidatsa person used the same word and knew what that meant, and that started a great relationship between the two. And eventually the Arikara, who were coming up from like Colorado, Wyoming area, or what we now call Colorado, Wyoming area, found refuge and peace and collaboration with them. And so those three tribes became known as the three affiliated tribes, or also Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara Nation. I'll show you some sources about that. I know probably Zach's very familiar with it, and I'm assuming that Jennifer probably knows some as well, but just chose them because this book is quite famous, and it's from North Dakota, and that's where I'm at. So, and it really is a cool book, and it's something that I think you could use with kids. A lot of drawings and examples and things like that. So you can kind of notice this is her. It's actually a picture of her, which is cool, and you could use that as a primary source as well. This is also Buffalo Bird Woman. And so, like I said, they use the Three Sister method. I did, so we started a garden at Minot State and based it off of the Three Sister method. But of course, Alex Dakota and Annette Menham and Danny Lukey and all these Ojibwe friends I have, I wanted to include them, Dan Henry and others. And so we also started an Ojibwe Three Sister garden. And correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but I think the difference is you plant a pumpkin instead of squash. But anyway, this was our idea to do at the school, and so I've been kind of into this and talking with people from MHA Nation and from Turtle Mountain about gardening practices and what's good and how to do it in a respectful way, whether it's spreading tobacco or offering prayers before we plant, or a stage, which the Buffalo Bird Woman talks about building a stage to sing to the plants. So anyway, she definitely has a legacy, and you can still read about her work today. And of course, the Three Sister method is really well known. I should say there are other nations and tribes and bands that use it, so I don't want to insinuate they're the only ones, but it is a special thing that brings them together. And then when you think about the three affiliates working so closely together, and then beans, squash, and corn, I always think that's kind of a beautiful thing too. Some also call it the Four Sister Garden because they'll plant sunflowers around as a protective barrier. So sometimes you'll hear that phrase as well. So anyway, oops, excuse me. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and give you a couple ideas that you could use.
I just changed my background to match
Oh,
you.
cool. Nice. All right. So I'm going to show you this video game that I made, but I called it Games of Sustainability. And so, like I mentioned, it is based off the Buffalo Bird Woman. And if you press this link, it'll take you right to where you can find the document. And like I said, there she is. You can learn all about it, the whole book. If I were working with students, I don't know if I would give them the whole book though, because it's kind of long. So I'll show you what I would do to cut it down to render a little bit. But if somebody was really into this, the whole book is really special, and I definitely recommend it. But for now, we'll just kind of focus more though. That's what it's based on. And then, like I said, the three affiliated tribes. And if you're not familiar with them, you can click on this link and it'll take you right to them. But it's just kind of a history as well as what they're doing now. They are over the Bakken oil reserve, which is the largest in North America. So it's really interesting if you happen to go out there. There's a lot of oil activity, but there's also a lot of traditional things happening as well. And I think it's generated a lot of wealth for them having all this oil. But you can kind of notice like the story and how many acres and things like that, enrolled members. So feel free to look at that at your leisure. I just nerd out on things like this. So that's where my mind was. All right. And then, so some key features, I was trying to use this book. And so I thought I could do things like have the players choose a site by the Missouri River, to think about soil, to think about where things would be good to plant. Also clearing the land, what that would look like, building the garden itself, how to plan it, how to add things. And also focusing on the three sisters. As I mentioned, building a stage is important. As the Buffalo Bird Woman talks about, they build a stage, and with that, they sing to their plants, to their relatives. They also use it to protect them, to watch out for intruders. And so that's a key feature. If anybody happens to go to Minot State, you'll see we now have a native prairie grassland that we're working on that was an old middle school. But anyway, we have a stage, and we think that's important to continue. Alex, for example, has played drum off of that. And then he even brought the Turtle Mountain high school drum group down last spring, and they played from it. So it was really cool to include them. So we thought that would be important for the players. And then also building an Earth Lodge. As some of you might know, that's a big deal in MHA Nation, and you can still visit Earth Lodges. They have the Knife River historical site, and you can actually go into Earth Lodges and see what they look like. My dear friend, Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass She-Kills is building an Earth Lodge house, like a modern one. And if you go to Mandaree School, you'll see kind of an Earth Lodge for their school board. And so it's definitely a fixture. And so I thought that would be important. As Buffalo Bird Woman talks about, and you can see I have it on chapter 5. So if you just wanted to go right there, that's what I would do with students, because it kind of gets to the point. You can learn about how she plants, how she soaks the seeds. And we tried to do all this with our project at Minot State. Anyway, she goes through it and has diagrams and hoeing and things like that. So we thought that would maybe be cool for students. And it's not written at a terribly hard level. I think upper elementary students could even be able to read this, certainly middle school and high school. But there are indigenous words, Hidatsa words, but you could build that in or work with them on that. So anyway, that was kind of the idea with why I chose that chapter. And now go back. And then, so another level we thought was integrating these three affiliated tribes and trying to bring that in a respectful way. And so you can see I made like missions. And so the first mission was planning the three sisters. And I tried to think about the flow of the game, looking at what Dr. DeMars and Anne Maria and others, and Maria and others have designed. I thought the flow mattered. So I was thinking of things like I mentioned earlier, soil preparation, building mounds, planting the three sisters, building a stage, like all of that could go in to the game. I'm picturing like little characters finding things. And then this one took like the most research and thought, but because music is so important, we thought that we should include that. I did try to be very respectful and ask cultural consultants. I mentioned Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass She-Kills just to make sure I was doing this respectfully. But these did come from open access, and she felt good about that, like it was open to the public. And so I found some songs. There are songs in the garden, song for the Goose Women's Society, which has a lot to do with planting and tending to the gardens. And I also found this cool song about the eagle catching camp, which also deals with gardens. And so you could pick from those songs, or we could have the students pick from those songs, or whoever's playing the game. And as they play those songs, different things could happen to the crops, and the environment is what we were picturing.
That's
And then,
super
oh
cool. That's
yeah.
super cool. Where did you find those songs?
I dug around and around here. I'll go to one, North Dakota Historical Society. I know like Zach and Turtle Mountain drama is important as it is all around. And it is important in MHA Nation, but not always. And so some of these songs don't have drum, and instead they'll have a rattle, and they would especially use rattlesnake rattles. And so you'll hear a lot of rattles, which for me is very interesting because I hear Alex and others play in drum groups. So I was like, where's the drum? And as I investigated, that's part of why. So anyway, I found those, and certainly if somebody wanted to put even more time and energy into it, you could find more. But that was just me kind of digging through archives and that sort of thing. So again, we thought it'd be cool if they work with those songs. Then mission three. Oh, and we also thought it'd be cool if there were elders in the game, and I would want to be very respectful on how to do that, but maybe they would have some insights, or that maybe there's a story that could go with the song. I didn't have enough time to research all of that, but I think that would be a cool wrinkle. Maybe we could use teachings from their elders, which is a free open access in North Dakota, or something to that effect. I always want to be respectful though of what goes out in the public, and make sure that I offer whether it's tobacco or money or whatever for those services. So, and then also we thought it'd be cool if they built a Earth Lodge. And again, using chapter 7 in the book, you can get a sense for the different lodges. And Dr. DeMars was like, "Oh, you should find a primary source." But if you go to the Buffalo Bird Woman, you can find in chapter 7, she's talking about lodges and the difference between them and how to build them. And so, anyway, again, they're choosing a location where to build it. They could grab materials such as timber, grass, willow branches, things like that, and then design the structure. I've been to quite a few Anishinaabe type lodges, and I know like we make the lodge with branches, and so I'm imagining like obviously you could use this in other cultures, with permission and things like that. But it wouldn't. You could make different variations of this in different communities if you thought it was a good idea. So the game flow. And they got to create a circular wooden frame with poles bent inward. And so you're dealing with some cool things, some geometry, some space. And then they could cover it is what I'm picturing. And just seeing how like sometimes they find things in their room or other missions in the games that you all make. I was picturing they would like grab different types of coverings for the roof. They would have like a low covered entrance facing the east, being respectful of their traditions and the way that they do things. And then you can kind of see some other features that we thought of. Maybe they would want to design areas for sleeping, cooking, storytelling, things like that. And then we thought, it would be awesome to have something about the three tribes coming together. And so we thought, talking about how they traded, how they shared resources, how they were reciprocal in terms of their relationship. And so we were picturing neighboring tribes or neighboring groups sharing resources, sharing tools, and then maybe that would help the garden live longer or help, your community thrive and do better. Maybe there's, some kind of reward, whether it be points or power up, or I don't know. I'll let the game designers decide, but I was picturing that would be cool as they collaborated and lived peacefully and reciprocally together, that would strengthen their overall well-being as a community. And so you can kind of see where I was going with that. I could have probably and would need to spend even more time to flesh it out, I'm sure, before it was ready for 7th generation games. But it was just kind of like what I was thinking. I'll kind of stop there and see if anybody has other thoughts, questions, maybe critique.
Well, I had one thing, and then one thing I wanted to ask Zach's opinion on. Just one is when you were talking about the songs, I thought that was really cool because in the Warrior Vets game, we one of the things I have students do is a kind of an Easter egg. Is and I don't know if you're familiar with how many of you are familiar with game design terms, like an Easter egg in software development is something kind of hidden, like an Easter egg that you find. And so as far as primary sources in the Warrior Vet game, yeah, there's the parts where they're going and learning stuff, but then there's things put in there, like there's pictures on the wall, which were taken that are primary sources. And I'm trying to think what there's like where you're capturing the German soldiers. There's a song that's playing, and the background music is actually a primary source. It's a song from World War One. And I think often when students are first learning about primary sources, they think of it as photos or maybe a
Mhm.
document or a map. They don't think of a song could be a primary source, but it can.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, for sure.
and then the thing I wanted to ask Zach's opinion on, because I know your master's is in tribal administration or so. It's tribal administration, is that right, Zach?
Yeah, tribal administration and governance.
And I know that Dan has worked really closely with MHA Nation, but just I was because people we put these on YouTube and a lot of people who are not us watch them. I wanted somebody who's not me and maybe knows more about it than me, which would be you, Zach, to give some opinions on like if somebody from outside that has no contact with Turtle Mountain or with MHA comes in and says, "Oh, I'm going to make a game about whatever tribe it is." How would you? Does anybody have recommendations for how to approach that? Because I can tell you how I do it. First of all, I usually don't do it unless I'm asked by somebody from Spirit Lake or Turtle Mountain or somewhere says, "Hey, we would like you to make a game with us." But sometimes it will come up. Sometimes it will come up, for example, we were, we were doing this game about Native American veterans, and there were some people who were Crow or people who were Choctaw and I didn't know somebody from every one of those tribes, but I tried to contact people from there. Or we were doing a game where the Upper Sioux were mentioned, and there was something mentioned about they caught turtles and ate turtles, and I didn't really know if they did or not. And so I had a friend of mine knew the tribal historic preservation officer over at Upper Sioux, and he gave me her number, and I called her up just to vet that and make sure it's true and accurate. So that's my long-winded way. That's what I do. But what would be your recommendations for people?
Well, I guess I'll start it off this way. There's a few documentaries that I saw Netflix do recently, and I really like the approach that in respect to the indigenous communities. Like there's one that I just recently caught. It's called Yinta, and it's about the pipeline they were trying to build in Canada and the indigenous people there. There was five indigenous tribes that it was endangering. So if you guys get a chance to check that out, and then also the lost children. It was a plane that went down, and the two adults died, and the four indigenous children survived, and they survived in the Amazon in the jungle for 40 days by themselves. And so what I'm getting at is in respect to all tribes, all nations in what we call Turtle Island, what is North America, the United States, we call that Turtle Island. So in respect to that, in terms of federal recognition, there's over like 536 tribes, something like that. I'm not sure but like what these Netflix documentaries did is, this is just the story of this area and these people. I'm learning a lot and researching my tribe's history, and like Turtle Mountain wasn't our homeland. We were pushed this way. We kind of just like were in between a migration to what we were told to where food grows on water. And then we kind of were right in the middle of Minnesota's Homestead Act. And so they were giving like 150 acres of land to these people, Norwegians and things like that. And they were coming over. And then they ran out of land to give in Minnesota. So then we got pushed to North Dakota. And in a long mix of thoughts, I guess, about it is, I really appreciate what everybody tries to do in respect. But it's hard because being indigenous myself, it's like I argue with my own people about things. We argue with ourselves about what's right, what's wrong. And to be honest, there's not going to be the right way to do it. There's always going to be somebody you can tell like who means well. You can tell, like, we're doing this in a good way. We don't mean, and Native people will understand that, so we can only identify with what's around here. One thing about like the history too is to the Anishinaabe people, the drum, it was gifted to us. If you guys if you Google, there's a story called it's about this woman called Tail Feather Woman, and that story is the representation of how we were gifted the drum from the Dakota people. It was like it was a there's a couple stories, but the one that I refer to, and you can find it if you Google it, is Tail Feather Woman. And that was the truce between the Dakota people and our people. And as you guys know, there's 5 tribes in North Dakota. There's the MHA, and then there's Spirit Lake, there's ours. We're a big mix of tribes in North Dakota. Like you brought up, Dan, the gardening and stuff. Like my people are very the Turtle Mountain Band and Chippewa people are very like different in that we are plains Ojibwe,
Mm.
where if you go backwards in the migration, you get the woodland Ojibwe, and there's like the deep woodland trees, and then you can even go coastal, and so like even our language follows that migration because our language is a descriptive language, and so our language is what they saw. Like there's 3 words that I know how to say white people in our language, and like it refers to what they saw. So they call them long knives, the Gitchi Mukamon, because that's what they saw. They had swords. What these guys were coming, off of the coast. They were coming off these ships, and they were on ships for a really long time, and they didn't bathe, and they had that stench. So the term for non-native, it was Jaganashi, which is it comes off of the word for a skunk as jigog, and it's jigog in Ojibwe means like a smelly hole. That's the skunk. And then if you're talking about and what the coastal Anishinaabe people, when the ships came, they were calling Jaganashi. It was like something that had stench because they weren't used to like that like whiskey and like pipe tobacco. Like tobacco hadn't been really yet introduced and stuff. So with respect, people will be fine with it, whatever way they'll see the earnestness in it.
It's a great answer. Is there anything else you wanted to ask or add, Anne Maria?
Oh, I was just gonna say what Zach said is pretty much what Juliana was talking about in the workshop at Sitting Bull too, where she said that she could talk about Lakota, and she doesn't even know everything about Lakota, but that when, for example, we were at NIA, there's people from all these different tribes who are Apache, who are Navajo, and Hopi, and you can't speak except for, like Zach said, of the people you know.
And I appreciated your phrase, Zach, in a good way or in a respectful way. And I often use that. I stole it, I think, from things that you said. Like if you're being respectful and your heart's in the right place, so people are generally will work with you or help you, so thank you. I think sometimes in Western culture, we like bureaucratize everything and you sort of lose the honesty of it all. So I love that answer.